Hello everybody, Calamity here, and today's video is going to be all about Kazuha, who's getting his rerun banner in a few days, well, at the time of recording this one. And I thought I'd make an updated guide on him, and we're just going to talk about everything you need to know about this character, with his talents, weapons, artifacts, constellations, team setups, and of course a combat demo at the end. Kazuha has just been one of those characters that's been amazing in so many teams, and just an amazing character in general. Able to buff your team as well as debuff your opponents, giving you a big damage boost. But not only that, Kazuha is also really good for exploration purposes. He's going to make your exploration a lot easier, especially if you don't have characters like Wanderer, or if you didn't get Kirara in the last banner. Kazuha is here to help you out. But let's get started with talking about his talents first and foremost. So first up, we have the normal attack talent. Now this is at level 10 only because of Child's passive ability, and that's because he's in the team right now, but ignore that for now. Kazuha's normal attack talent is pretty standard, except for the plunging attack, where he has a special version of a plunge attack. And because of that, it's actually worth upgrading this talent. You don't have to go as hard as I did. I kind of wanted to triple crown my Kazuha when I got him, but I stopped at level 9 for his normal attack. You don't have to go that high. It will help, though, with his plunging attack. So next up, we have his elemental skill, which is called the Chihaya Baru. This is an amazing elemental skill. It's going to pull enemies towards Kazuha, where you cast it, and then it's going to lift you up into the air. Now, when you do that, that's what gives Kazuha the ability to do this special plunging attack. You can see that the plunging attack, the special plunging attack that he has, they have the text for it in the elemental skill as well. So you'll be able to do a special elemental or a plunging attack that does ammo damage, as well as it will pull in objects and enemies. So there are two versions of the elemental skill. There is the press version, which is like a quick jump into the air, and then the hold version, where he does a little bit more charge. It has a bigger AoE, and the skill will deal more damage, but it will have a longer cooldown. Now, as you play Kazuha, knowing the difference between using his press and hold version, you'll sort of get the hang of when to use which version. But in general, it's better to use the hold version for large groups of enemies, because you need that bigger AoE, pull in more enemies to your location. And then the press version, you'll probably want to do it if the enemies are already grouped up and nearby, or if you're doing it like on a boss, because you can't really pull bosses. So that's when you would probably use the press for like faster elemental particle generation. If we look at the skill attributes, we can definitely see there's a huge difference between using the hold version versus the press version, and the longer cooldown is 3 seconds. So it's a total of 9 seconds if you do the hold version versus 6 seconds if you just press it. Next up, we have Kazuha's burst. Now this is also an amazing part of his kit. As the name suggests, Kazuha is going to do a single slash that's going to create what's called an autumn whirlwind that periodically does AoE damage, and it will actually combine itself with an element that it comes into contact with. Now this is where I kind of get a little annoyed at how Hoyoverse describes this burst to you, because it's misinformation. So if we look at the elemental absorption, it says if the autumn whirlwind comes into contact with hydro, pyro, cryo, or electro, it will deal the additional damage of that type. And then it also says elemental absorption may only occur once per use, so it can only absorb one element. Now you might be wondering, okay, but what if there's a bunch of elements in the whirlwind? How does it choose? Now this is where I get annoyed, because the order here makes it look like Hydro is the most important, then Pyro, then Cryo, then Electro, when in fact this list here is completely wrong. The actual order of priority order of elements when you're using Kazuha's burst is Pyro, Hydro, Electro, then Cryo. So the order here is all jumbled up for some reason. So what that means is, if there's a bunch of elements in the burst field itself, it's going to look for Pyro first. If it sees it, it's going to be like, all right, good, I'm going to absorb that. And it's going to be a Pyro absorbed burst. And then, if it doesn't see Pyro, then it's going to look for Hydro, and so on and so on. So that means if you want to swirl, or excuse me, if you want to absorb a certain element with Kazuha's burst, you need to make sure that the other higher priority elements are not present. So if you want cryo to be in the elemental burst or to be absorbed, you need to make sure there's nothing but cryo in the field itself. Otherwise, it's going to absorb a different element. And yeah, it does not work with Dendro. You cannot absorb Dendro or Geo. But other than that, frustrating detail aside, this burst is still amazing. It does plenty of off-field damage as well as constantly apply swirling, which is going to give your team a significant buff, as we're about to see from Kazuha's Ascension passives. So let's move on and talk about them some more. Oh, but before we do, let's take a look at the skill attributes. So you can see the initial slash has kind of a high multiplier. Then it has a dot damage of 216. When the burst absorbs an additional element, no matter what the element is, it's going to get that additional 65% damage bonus. It lasts for 8 seconds, cooldown for 15, and it only has an energy cost of 60, which is great for how much value this burst provides. That is insanely good, making your energy recharge needs a bit more manageable. So let's move on to Kazuha's passive talents. We have the Somon Swordsmanship being the first one here. Now, this is also a very important Ascension passive, so let's talk about it. When you use your elemental skill, and once again, you come into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, or Electro, the elemental skill is going to absorb that element, and then the plunging attack that you do will actually do increased damage with the elemental type that you just did. So it will do 200% additional attack of the absorbed elemental type as damage. That's a huge boost in damage there, which is fantastic. And this is still going to be considered plunging damage. And you can only absorb one element at a time. And again, just like the burst, it does go by the priority list. So Pyro is going to be the highest priority, then Hydro, then Cryo, then Electro. So let's move on to his next Ascension talent, which is called the Poetics of the Fubutsu. Now this is also yet another amazing passive talent. So when you do a swirl reaction, Kazuha is going to grant your entire party a 0.04 elemental damage bonus to the element absorbed by the swirl for every point of elemental mastery he has for 8 seconds. Bonuses for different elements obtained through this method can coexist, so it even tells you here. So let's digest this a bit. So first off, just for the ease of math here and for this example, if your Kazuha has 1,000 elemental mastery, that means he's going to provide your entire team with a 40% elemental damage bonus to whatever element he swirls with. So if it's fire, you're going to get 40% increased fire damage. If it's Hydro, then, etc. Hydro, then you get the 40% Hydro damage bonus. Now, the fact that you can do multiple elements that can coexist is actually insane, and what makes Kazuha one of the best damage amplifiers in the game. So you can provide a 40% elemental damage bonus to multiple elements at the same time. Now, this involves a unique and kind of advanced technique that Kazuha players need to learn, and that's called double swirling. And just like the name suggests, you are swirling twice so that you are amplifying 2 different elements at the same time. There's even something called triple swirling, but we don't need to get that advanced yet. In a video like this, without making the video too long, so we will showcase this later on if you are interested in seeing how the double swirl works. But in the comments below, I'm going to provide you 2 videos with much more in-depth tutorials on how to actually do a double swirl effectively. So finally, we have Cloud Strider, which is going to decrease your stamina consumption for your party by 20%, and this kind of talent does not stack with similar talent. So you can't have a team full of stamina consumption reduction and have like 80% reduction or something crazy like that. It only works once, but this is also what makes Kazuha such a great exploration character, is you can sprint for much longer. Alright, next up, let's talk about weapon options for your Kazuha. He's actually a very easy character to build for, and he's very versatile when it comes to his weapon. A weapon that I can suggest, especially early on for newer players or low spenders, is an Iron Sting. This is a weapon that you can craft as early as Mondstadt, so it's available for just about everyone. And it has a subset of Elemental Mastery, which is what we want to improve that buff that we were talking about for the elemental damage bonus. And the weapon skill also boost Kazuha damage as well. Other weapon options, if you are struggling for energy recharge and are unable to burst off cooldown, you could go for other options like the Sacrificial Sword or the ever popular Favonius Sword, whichever you happen to have. Both will work. Other craftable weapons are the craftable sword in Inazuma, and if you want to, you can even go for the craftable sword in Sumeru, but I would only recommend that if you're using Kazuha in a aggravate team. But yeah, plenty of free-to-play options there if you are willing to pull on a few weapon banners. A Ziphos Moonlight is honestly going to be one of the best 4-star weapons for Kazuha. Just like the similar options we showed earlier, it does give you Elemental Mastery as a base stat. However, it also turns that Elemental Mastery, which you'll be heavily investing in, into energy recharge, not just for Kazuha, but for your whole team. That's why this weapon is absolutely amazing. Next up, let's talk about his artifact set. And honestly, there only is one. Well, most Kazuhas are going to be using the Viridescent Veneer set. There are a few other occasions where you can equip them with something else, but that's beyond the scope of this video, and there's no need to dive into those. So for the most part, Viridescent Veneer is your go-to. And why is that? Because on the 4-piece set, first of all, it's going to increase your swirl damage by 60%, which is a nice damage boost there, but the important thing is that it decreases your opponent's elemental resistance to the element infused by the swirl by 40% for 10 seconds. Now keep in mind, we just talked about double swirling, right? So yes, you can actually double swirl on a boss to decrease their elemental resistances to 2 different element types by 40%. Overall, even if you're not double swirling, this is going to turn Kazuha's buff, right, which was assuming you're at 1,000 elemental mastery for this example, that's a 40% damage increase from his Ascension talent, right? Well, now you're shredding 40% elemental resistance on your enemies. This is going to result in like an 80% damage boost for your character, which is insane. And this is exactly why this set is the best option for your Kazuha. Now, when it comes to building your individual artifact pieces, what are you looking for? I think it's actually quite easy. You're going to be looking for Elemental Mastery and Energy Recharge as your most important stats. Anything else you get after that is going to be just gravy or icing on the cake, whatever phrase you want to use. Mine got some crit damage here, but it's whatever. Just try to get as much Elemental Mastery and Energy Recharge as you can for your artifact set pieces. Like this one is a great piece right here. Now, if you are wondering what other substats you could look for, you could get some attack percentage, which is going to boost your damage a bit. Crit rate, crit damage is always nice, but not needed as much as like you would for a DPS. So just try to get as much Elemental Mastery and Energy Recharge as you can. And just as I just stated, for your main stats for the Sands, the Goblet, and the Circlet, we are looking for Elemental Mastery as your main stat across the board. The only time I would suggest something else here is Energy Recharge for the Sands, only if you're really, really struggling on getting some Energy Recharge. You can also use the Mystic Offering at an Alchemy Station if you want to convert some other artifact pieces that you're not using into additional Viridescent Veneer set when you're trying to farm for artifacts. So if you end up going to the domain for this set, and let's say you just kept getting a bunch of Maiden Beloved for some reason, because RNG hates you, well, at least you can turn those into Viridescent Veneers thanks to the Mystic Offering. Alright, let's talk Constellations for Kazuha here, and you can see mine is at C0, and he is perfectly fine at C0. I have been able to clear all iterations of the Spiral Abyss with him ever since I pulled for him, and even the current one, which has been really frustrating, but Kazuha made it doable for sure. So that being said, let's just go over them just to see what they do if you are interested in investing heavily into your Kazuha. So the C1 is called Scarlet Hills, and this is going to reduce your elemental skills cooldown by 10%, and it's also going to just completely reset your skill after you use your burst. So this is actually going to be a nice little addition to your Kazuha, so you're basically able to regenerate particles faster, especially after you use your burst. You can just either use a quick tap of the skill or do a hold version. and then swap off. Next up, we have C2, which is basically going to increase everybody's elemental mastery that's inside the field of your Autumn Whirlwind by 200. That is a significant damage boost for so many different reaction teams. Vaporize, Melt, Aggravate, Spread. If you are doing Hyper Bloom and Kazuha's in the party for some reason, that's going to increase your damage there as well. So big damage boost. And not to mention, that's a big damage boost for himself via his buff. C3 and C5 are just going to increase his skill and burst respectively, which is, that's good. It just means more damage. It doesn't improve like the pull effect on his skill or anything like that, or the duration on his burst, but it just means more damage. C4 is going to take care of your energy recharge needs even further. When you use your elemental skill, depending on if you press or hold it, you'll get 3 or 4 energy particles respectively. And as an added bonus, while you're gliding, you're going to regenerate 2 energy per second. It's a nice little constellation to have. Definitely removes your need to build as much energy recharge as you would normally need on him, so you could just go full on, elemental mastery substats and other damage substats as well. And finally, his C6 is, if you are tired of Kazuha not being the main DPS himself, well, C6 is going to help you change that. When you use either his skill or burst, Kazuha is going to gain an Animo Infusion, meaning his normal attacks will also deal Animo damage. Not only that, your elemental mastery will increase the damage dealt by his normal, charge, and plunging attacks by 0.2%. So assuming you have 1,000, 1,200, or whatever crazy amount of EM at this point, Kazuha is just basically going to get a big boost in his own damage. This is definitely whale territory stuff and not needed at all, since we mainly use Kazuha as a buff for the team and a debuffer for your enemies. Next up, we have team setups before we go into talking about what makes Kazuha such a great exploration character and just talking about double swirls. But first off, let's talk about one of the more popular teams that you can use with Kazuha, which is a Child's International team. You might be familiar with a team like this. I've talked about it before on this channel, and I'm sure you've seen it elsewhere around the internet. And, usually they say if you don't have Kazuha, well, put in Sucrose. And, well, since we are talking about Kazuha, we're going to put him in this team, and he's here just... In any team he's in, he's basically there just to do the same thing. He's there to buff your main DPS's damage and debuff your opponents and help with grouping. So if you're fighting multiple enemies, he's great for that. He'll pull them all together for you, especially if your melee is... If your main DPS is a melee character, he's great for that. He's just going to put them all in melee range to be attacked for you. But here's an example of the Child's team. Here's another example of an Electrocharge team you could do with Kazuha. Here's another example of a team you could do with Kazuha. If you don't have Yu'lon, then you would just use Jingcho, of course. But you can pair him up with a lot of main Pyro DPS characters. Yan Fei would also be another option. I wouldn't recommend Hu Tao, though, because Hu Tao moves around a lot because of her charge attacks. So she's not able to stay in Bennett's field of healing, and you don't want to heal her anyways. And Hu Tao needs a shield as well. The damage boost is nice, but you definitely want your Hu Tao to stay alive to actually do the damage. Another popular team that you can put Kazuha in is an Aggravate team. So if you're not using Kaching here, you can opt in to use Raiden Shogun instead, for an example. And he again, just like before, he's just here to help increase your damage as well as swirl your enemies' resistances to lower them. Another popular team comp you've probably seen Kazuha in are freeze teams with either Ganyu or Ayaka. So yeah, there's just plenty of teams where you can fit Kazuha in. It's insane. He's just useful on so many teams. I didn't even showcase a lot of them. You could put him in his own international team. If you don't have Tartaglia, then this would be Jingcho, and there you go. Or if you don't have, depending on what you have, even Klee works with Kazuha. Klee and Kazuha can pull in Klee's bombs to your position and deal a bunch of damage. So there's just so many options out there and how you want to build your Kazuha, and I'm sure they're all going to work just fine. Alright, so there is some exploration stuff I wanted to showcase with Kazuha. Not again, as I said earlier in the video, not only is he just a great meta unit used in a lot of teams, he's also gonna make your exploration life a lot easier. And one of the ways he does that is just by making longer glides much more manageable. And he does that because he's able to use his elemental skill mid-air. So for example, we're gonna glide all the way to this mountain. Now if I didn't have Kazuha, this would be kind of sketchy, and I'm not sure if I'd be able to make it. But with Kazuha, we can keep using our elemental skill. Oh, we also have that little wind boost while we're gliding, that helped too. But we can use our elemental skill basically to keep propping us up. That also saves stamina, by the way. So as you can see, we've barely used any stamina while we're gliding over there. And it's gonna make the long glide much more bearable, and of course those wind boosts are helping, but we can just keep spamming it and not have to worry about like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna make it, or I don't know if my stamina is gonna be enough. Okay, well, there was several wind boosts that made that a lot more manageable, but you get the point, right? Like, you can use this to glide long distances, and it makes it that much easier. Alright, scenario number 2 where Kazuha can be really useful. Kazuha has something called the infinite climb, and let's just... Obviously, my stamina is in an okay place, right? Like, I can climb to the top of this mountain, and we'll be fine. But let's just pretend like I'm not sure, or I clearly don't have enough stamina to make it. What you can do with Kazuha is you cancel climb, and then you quickly tap his skill, and you'll be able to climb basically forever. You can climb to the top of anything as long as you do this properly by using Kazuha's skill. So we're just going to demonstrate that by climbing to the top of this mountain here. So we're going to press, for PC players, it's the X button by default to let go of your climbing state, and you're going to quickly jump with his elemental skill by tapping E. So we press X, T, then you want to press forward, right, so that they go back into the climbing stance. So we'll do it one more time. So we press X, E, and then forward a little bit just so he climbs back on. Then you chill for a bit, wait for your skill to reset, and then you do the same thing. Now obviously we can climb the rest because we have enough stamina, but like if you ever find yourself in that situation where you're like, oh, I don't know where I'm gonna make it, Kazuha will make sure you make it. Alright, we're gonna do a double swirl showcase real fast, and we're gonna use the Magu Kenki as our test dummy, and we're not gonna do the full fight. I just want to show you that you can do a double swirl with Kazuha. It is again, as I mentioned before, it is kind of advanced, but it is important for any Kazuha users to know how to do this, which is why I provided much more in-depth guides. I figured if you want to learn more about double swirling, those 2 guides down in the comments below are going to go into much more detail. Now, to do a double swirl, we basically need to apply many instances, or at least 2, of the elements that we want to double swirl. And in this team's case, we want to swirl both hydro and pyro damage, right? So we're going to have to just basically apply both. So we're going to wait for this guy to get up, first of all. Wait for him to fully awake. There we go. Now we're going to use Tartaglia's skill, Bennett burst, Kazuha burst into his skill. Now if we pause and take a look at the elemental damage type bonus, you can see... Now I know you're wondering, why isn't it 40%? Well, that's because my Kazuha doesn't exactly have 1,000 EM. He has like 900 something. But you can see the pyro and the hydro damage bonus are both being applied right now from the passive talent that we talked about earlier. So this is how you do a double swirl on your character. This is very important depending on what team he's on. You would definitely want to do it on a Child's International team for the vape damage, right? So this is good here, but it might not be the same for every team you're using him on. So hopefully this quick little demonstration was helpful. If you do have questions about the double swirl, feel free to leave a comment. I'll do my best to help you out. Alright, so I want to showcase Kazuha in some combat finally here, and we're going to actually use the Spiral Abyss to do so. And I'm only going to do the first chamber, and the reason for that being because this video is already going on for too long. And I don't want to do all 3 chambers again, because I have to do the second half, and that's just a lot of time. So we're just going to do the first chamber, and I'm going to showcase Kazuha being very useful for this team. So we have a basic melt team here. We got Rosaria. It's basically an international team, but instead of water or hydro, we have cryo, and we're just gonna see how this goes. So, most people run to the edge of the arena to group up the the Whopper flowers, and that is absolutely fine if you want to do that. But because Kazuha can just pull them reliably, we don't have to do that technique. And I don't have my elemental skill. Let me just wait for it to come back. You can see we're using Kazuha here to pull in all the Whopper flowers for easy grouping. I think one of them... Yeah, one of them dug away, I think, and I didn't get them, but that's okay. That is okay. And another thing about Kazuha is he can actually pull these Dorito bots together. You can see that they moved. And Venti can do this too as well with his elemental burst, but you just gotta, again, the auto aim can be kind of annoying, so that's just something we want to look out for. Kind of messed up that rotation, but it's alright. It is alright. We're gonna group up these Dorito bots next. And you can see this has been a pretty, I would say, well, other than that part where I got hit, but pretty smooth chamber 1 clear time there. Again, as you can see, my second half team, I just picked whatever. I didn't really put a correct team together. I just don't want to have to go through the abyss again. So yeah, just some final words on Kazuha before we call it a day on this guide here. Kazuha has been an amazing character ever since he's released. He was definitely underestimated on his initial release, though. A lot of people thought, you know, Kazuha's not going to be that great. We already have Venti anyways, and it's fine, but Kazuha ended up exceeding just about everyone's expectations, and he is one of the strongest characters in the game, and he still continues to be one of the strongest characters in the game several years later. Still used in a lot of meta teams, and even if you're a player that's like, I don't play meta, I don't care for meta, I only pull waifus, etc., stuff like that. Dude, he just makes your life easier in Genshin, no matter what. If you're doing battling, he'll help group up enemies easily. If you're doing exploration, I showcase the gliding thing and the climbs. Like, he is just an overall, no matter what you're doing, casual play, endgame stuff, bosses, farming, he's gonna just make your life that much easier, and that is why I recommend him so much. And it always pains me to see comments like that on Twitter, YouTube. I don't want to pull Kazuha because he's meta. I don't want to pull Kazuha because I only pull girls. Like, it's not even about that. Like, if you just want an easier time exploring Teva and you don't have, like, Wanderer, or you didn't get Kirara, characters like that also make exploration easier, get him just for that. That being said, I hope this guide was helpful. If you have any other questions about Kazuha, if I failed to explain something well enough to you, if I forgot something, please let me know in the comments. I'll do my best to answer you. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you appreciate this kind of content, and I'll see you in the next video.